The book of Revelation reveals dragons and beasts with 7 heads. As a Seventh-day Adventist, we often differ on the interpretation of this symbol, but after today's video, I hope that you can understand clearly who these 7 heads represent. As we continue our series on prophecy, today we delve into the meaning of the 7 horns found in the book of Revelation. The chapters in Revelation that deal with these 7 heads are found in Revelation 12, where we see a dragon with 7 heads, and then we see in Revelation 13 and 17 a beast with 7 heads. As a Seventh-day Adventist, there are many things that we have a consensus on its meaning, but the 7 heads aren't one of them. And in today's video, we're going to look at 4 different views that I've personally heard Seventh-day Adventists give on the 7 heads. And we're going to determine which one of these 4 views is most biblically logical to be representative of these 7 heads. So here we go. The 7 popes. A view that I became familiar with several years ago was this idea that the 7 heads represent 7 popes. What prompted this idea was in 2005, Pope Benedict XVI was elected as the head of the Catholic Church. However, he abruptly stepped down in 2013, and this would prompt some Adventists to declare this news as a fulfillment of the following prophecy found in Revelation 17:10. It says, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space." And thus, when Pope Benedict stepped down as the Pope, some Adventists begin identifying him as the 7th head who ruled a short time. And while I do believe that the papacy or the popes do carry a relevancy to Bible prophecy, what you also must understand is that Pope Benedict wasn't the only pope that had a short stint as the Roman pontiff. According to the historical record, Pope John Paul I, who became head of the church in 1978, would be considered the 5th head, assuming Benedict was the 7th, and he only ruled for 33 days. Now, if prophecy had said the 5th head and the 7th head ruled for a short space, then maybe a conversation could be had. However, because this interpretation doesn't line up with the historical record, nor does the prophetic application seem to fit, it is my recommendation that we move on from this interpretation of the 7 heads. The 7 forms of Roman government. According to Uriah Smith, the 7 heads are 7 forms of government that have existed in the Roman Empire, are usually enumerated as follows: 1 kingly, 2 consular, 3 decemvirate, 4 dictatorial, 5 triumvirate, 6 imperial, and 7th papal. Kings, consuls, decemvirs, dictators, triumvirs had passed away in John's day. He was living under the imperial form. 2 more were to arise after his time. 1 was only to continue a short space, and hence is not usually reckoned among the heads. While the last, which is usually denominated the 7th, is in reality the 8th. The head which was to succeed the imperial and continue a short space could not be the papal, for that has continued longer than all the rest put together. We understand, therefore, that the papal head is the 8th, and that a head of short continuance intervened between the imperial and papal. In fulfillment of this, we read that after the imperial form had been abolished, there was a ruler who, for about the space of 60 years, governed Rome under the title of the Exarch of Ravenna. Thus, we have the connecting link between the imperial and papal heads. So here Uriah Smith suggests that the 7 heads found on the beast and the dragon represent 7 forms of Roman government. The idea is pretty clever, I must admit. But the problem with this idea is these aren't really forms of Roman government. You see, from my research, there's only really 3 forms of Roman government. That's kingdom, republic, and empire. Now, what Uriah Smith appears to be referring to is what I call a sub-government. However, if we are talking about sub-governments, then now we have to include all the forms of sub-government. Sub-governments like the principate form of government, or the dominate form of government, Or what about when the Eastern and the Western forms split? What about that form of government? You see, when we factor in all these forms of sub-governments of the Roman Empire, we then begin to realize there weren't 7 of them. Then Uriah Smith, not wanting to place the papacy as the 7th head, inserts the exarch of Ravenna as the 7th because of the 8th power mentioned in Revelation 17:10, and then he moves the papacy into this 8th position. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a lot of respect for Uriah Smith, but you have to know that this is also incorrect. It's incorrect because the papacy was established in the year 538 AD. But according to the historical record, the exarch of Ravenna didn't begin ruling until 584 AD. And ladies and gentlemen, if the exarch of Ravenna was the 7th head and the papacy was the 8th head, then the papacy can't come to power as the 8th head before the 7th head, which is the exarch of Ravenna. In other words, the 8th head can't be the 8th head and still come to power before the 7th head. Now, you may choose to believe Uriah Smith because he's Uriah Smith, but as a Seventh-day Adventist, I understand that prophecy is way too important for us to simply choose to believe someone because we believe he's knowledgeable. We must examine every facet of our prophetic understanding, especially in the books of Daniel and Revelation. And if you do this, you'll discover, as I did, that the 7 heads found in Revelation are not 7 forms of Roman government. The 7 world empires beginning with Babylon. There are a number of Adventist scholars and Adventist teachers who hold to the theory that the 7 heads found in Revelation are 7 world empires beginning with the Babylonian Empire, thus making Babylon Empire number 1, Persia number 2, Greece number 3, pagan Rome number 4, Papal Rome number 5, France number 6, and the United States number 7. Now, I must include here that some replace France with the US and then make the 7th a revived papacy. But either way we line this up, I believe that this view is also unwarranted according to the Bible prophetic record. You see, according to Revelation 17:10, there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Now, if 5 kings had already fallen, then that meant that John was writing as if he was living during the time of France. This doesn't make sense. You see, there's no biblical justification for John to place himself at the time of France. You see, if John says that 5 are fallen, then this represents a waymark that we must respect. You see, if John is giving us an historical account from his time frame, then we must take the Bible at its word. And if we take John at his word, when he says that 5 had already fallen, this must mean that he lived during the time of the 6th king. And this 6th king had to be pagan Rome. And now, revealing the final world power, Ellen White also gives us some perspective on this. She says, the last that is to wage war against the church and the law of God is represented by a beast with lamb-like horns. The beast preceding it had risen from the sea, but this came out of the earth, representing the peaceful rise of the nation which it symbolized, the United States. So, from John's testimony and Ellen White's commentary, we have enough information to understand that these 7 heads are 7 world empires. And according to John's testimony, the 6th world empire, or the 6th world government, was the pagan Roman government. And from Ellen White's commentary, we now see that the 8th power, the 8th head that is revealed in Revelation 17, must be the United States of America, the last world power to persecute the church. And once you put these 2 pieces of information together, it's pretty obvious who the 7 heads are in Bible prophecy. And now we understand that through John's testimony and Ellen White's commentary, we can now gain a better understanding of who these 7 heads are. And what we must understand is that these 7 heads are 7 world governments that Satan has used to destroy God's people from the time God called a people to himself. And what we must understand is that these 7 governments don't begin with the Babylonian Empire. They begin with the Egyptian Empire. And these governments are number 1, Egypt, number 2, Assyria, number 3, Babylon, number 4, Medo-Persia, number 5, Greece, number 6, pagan Rome, and number 7, papal Rome. And for those of you who might be confused as to how I determined that Egypt and Assyria are part of these 7 heads, I suggest you go back and watch my video on what are the 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear. And now that we understand this interpretation of the 7 heads, you can clearly see that we are in compliance with John's testimony, as he said 5 had already fallen. And we confirm that by the time John gave this testimony, 5 of these world governments had already fallen, from the Egyptian Empire to the Greek Empire. And we can see that the 8th power is the United States of America, which according to Revelation 17:10 would be part of the 7th government, the papacy. Of course, now it makes sense, because the 8th power, the United States of America, according to Revelation 13, rises and gives life to the image of the beast, or the 7th power, which is the papacy. And now it makes sense why the 8th power is part of the 7th power. Now, there's only one thing left that we have to uncover and we have to explain. And this one thing has confused most individuals who believe that the papacy is the 7th head. And hopefully this video will clear this up for you. All right, so here it is. In Revelation 17:10, it says, when he, the 7th head, cometh, he must continue a short space. Now, we know that the papacy ruled for over 1,200 years. So how in the world can the papacy have continued for a short space? And here is where you must understand that the short space found in Revelation 17:10 is not necessarily a period of time. It's a period in time. In Revelation 12, after Satan had crucified Jesus, he began persecuting the saints. And notice how much time Satan realized he had left once he began persecuting the church. It says, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. Ladies and gentlemen, the short time in Revelation chapter 12 refers to the same time period as the short space in Revelation chapter 17. And they are not so much a period of time, they are a period in time. In other words, after Satan crucified Christ, and he couldn't leave this planet anymore, it was then that he realized, wait a minute, I only have a short time left. And once that short time period began, is when we see the papacy rising. And the short time began with the great apostasy, or the falling away, or what we call the mystery of iniquity. And that short time continued through the reign of the papacy, the 7th power. It continues through the reign of the 8th power, the United States of America, all the way until the end of the world. You see, the short time is not relative to the other kingdoms or empires that were ruling. The short time is relative to the dragon once he discovered that he only had a little bit of time to apostatize the world. In essence, the reign of the papacy coincides with the time frame that Satan discovered that he had a short time. And the papacy is Satan's response to that short time. And now I hope you can see that the 7 heads represents 7 governments that Satan has used to attack and destroy God's people. And under the guise of the dragon in Revelation chapter 12, these 7 heads have 7 crowns. But under the guise of the beast in Revelation 13, these 7 heads have blasphemy as their crown. And what we must understand is that the 7 heads are represented on the dragon in Revelation chapter 12 from its civil standpoint. But under the beast in Revelation 13, these 7 heads are represented under the guise of the papal power who blasphemes God's name. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I truly believe that God is leading us here. And I want to make sure that you understand that I respect Uriah Smith and I respect those who are voices of authority, especially prophetic authority in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. However, I believe that God has given us enough information to understand who these 7 heads are. And these 7 heads are the 7 governments who Satan has used from the time God called the people to himself all the way until the end of the world. I'm the Seventh-day Adventist Watchman, and you've just learned the meaning of the 7 heads in Bible prophecy.